Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Air Brake Endorsement Training. My name is Josh Barron. I'm a certified instructor here at Midwest Truck Driving School. Thanks for joining us today for air brake training. Now, I've done this training for probably thousands of students now over the last approximately 10 years. And I find a lot of students struggle with air brakes. They struggle with the concept. They struggle with why do trucks have air brakes? How come air brakes are the most common type of foundation brake found on heavy vehicles and semi-trucks and different things. So we're going to talk about all those different things, and let's go ahead and dive in. So first of all, if you want to drive a Class A CDL or a Class B CDL vehicle with air brakes, you got to have air brakes on your license. So obtaining a CDL or CLP, commercial learner's permit with air brakes, typically most of you, if you're just getting started in the trucking industry, you're going to need to get that CLP, that commercial learner's permit. And in order to get a Class A CLP with air brakes, you got to take the air brake knowledge test, the combination vehicle knowledge test, as well as the general knowledge test. So first of all, you also have to pass a DOT physical and receive your DOT medical card. And that's one thing, if you're in the trucking industry, the two things that you have to have on you all the time: your DOT physical, your medical card, and your commercial driver's license, your CDL, or your CLP if you're still training. You got to complete the air brakes training. Now, this is recommended but not required. I know several companies require this. Several states will kind of institute their own restrictions that you have to take some type of air brake training. So this is a lot of great information here, and a lot of people elect to go through a training before going down to the DMV to take the actual test. So after that, you can go down to the DMV and take your written knowledge test. Now, some states call it the BMV, the Bureau of Motor Vehicles, the MVD, Motor Vehicle Division, the SOS. Throughout this presentation, I'm referred to it as the DMV, just because most states refer to it as the DMV, just so everyone on the presentation today knows what I'm talking about. Some state instituted restrictions vary. So some DMVs limit to taking the knowledge test 5 times in a year. So if you're in one of those states, you're going to want to go through this presentation and this information 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 times. There's a lot of information in this, and I'm going to encourage you to go through it more times than not. That way, when you get down there, you can pass this test the first or second time taking it. Also, there's a mandatory week waiting period in between tests in some states. So if you're in one of those states that require you to wait a week, if you fail it, you're going to want to, once again, go through this training 2, 3, 4 times so that you're prepared to take that test, you're knowledgeable about air brakes. And I will tell you, throughout the years, I haven't had one student not be able to pass the CLP test. So I want you guys to really have faith in yourself that you can do it, and go through this training and go through it a few times if you have to, and you will pass the CLP knowledge test at your state's DMV. After that, people getting a Class A or B CDL must also take the general knowledge written test, as well as the combination vehicle written test for Class A CMVs. So if you plan on getting your Class A, you're going to need to take that combination vehicle, that general knowledge, as well as this one as well, air brakes. And then after that, you have to take the final state skills test in a CMV with full air brakes. So if you want to make sure you don't have any air brake restrictions on your license, that CMV, that truck's got to have full air brakes on it for that final state test. So let's go ahead and dive right into the information today. Air brake system. So there's technically 3 air brake systems on a semi-truck. You have the service brake system, the emergency brake system, and the parking brake system. The service brake system applies and releases the brakes when you use the brake pedal during normal driving. And so when you're going down the road, you have the fuel pedal on the right, you have the clutch on the left, and you got your service brake right in the middle. So a good way to remember your service brake is that it services all the brakes. When you hit the brake pedal, it supplies air to all the brakes on the truck and trailer, stopping your vehicle. To test the service brakes, brake firmly while slowly moving forward at approximately 5 miles an hour. So during the actual pre-trip test, this is something you have to do. Pull the truck forward approximately 5 miles an hour, push the clutch and the service brake, and it should stop the vehicle. And that's to ensure that the service brakes are working properly. Then you have the emergency brake system. This system uses parts of the service brake and parking brake systems to stop the vehicle in the event of a brake system failure. Now, these valves do a lot. We're going to talk a lot about these valves, but under emergency brake system, the yellow valve is the tractor emergency brake, and the red valve is the trailer emergency brake. And then the last one here, you have the parking brake system, which you want to use whenever you leave the vehicle unattended. Under parking brake system, the valves, the yellow one is the tractor parking brake and your main parking brake, and the red one is your trailer parking brake. So once again, we'll talk about those a lot more throughout the presentation here. Most trucks have dual air brake systems. What does that mean? It uses a single set of brake controls referring to the service brake, the brake pedal. One system is called the primary system and one is called the secondary system. And one operates the front axle, which is typically your secondary system, and one operates the rear axles, which is typically your primary system. So right here you can see air gauges right here, air gauges right here. So these are what they call supply pressure gauges. And once again, it shows you how much air you have in your air tanks. So the P for here stands for primary and the S stands for secondary. So this primary tank has 15, 20 psi. This one about the same for the secondary air tank. Newer trucks, the gauges look something like this. You got the secondary air tank, primary air tank looks something like that. If a low air pressure warning comes on for just one of the two dual air brake systems, you should park safely and continue only after the system has been fixed. So if you have an issue with the secondary system and that pressure starts to decline, okay, we want to get that system fixed before moving on. And I will tell you, with air brake systems, today's modern air brake systems really don't have a lot of issues. They have worked out all the bugs. They're very bulletproof systems, and that's part of the reason why most trucks, buses, dump trucks, propane trucks, tankers, lowboys, Conestogas, all those are going to have air brakes because of their durability when it comes to stopping and their reliability. Before you drive a vehicle with a dual air brake system, wait until the pressure in each system reaches at least 100 psi. That's important. So at 60 psi, that low pressure light and or buzzer is going to come on. You can see the light that comes on there when it gets below 60 psi. And so when that air pressure is building at 60 psi, it's going to about 60 psi. That light and buzzer are going to shut off. You don't want to release the parking brakes and move at that point because the parking brakes might not be fully released. You want to wait till each system is at least 100 psi. And I will tell you, a typical fully charged system is somewhere between 100 and 125 psi. And you can see that right here as well. Typically the governor kicks on at 100 and off at 125. So this needle will kind of fluctuate right here the whole time as you're going down the road. And newer trucks seems to be a little bit more pressure. Typically that 125 to 135 is normal there as well for those gauges to be reading in that higher level when it comes to your supply pressure gauge. Gauges, once again, your supply pressure gauge tells you how much air you have in your air tanks. So once again, you have the primary supply pressure gauge and secondary supply pressure gauge. Right here tells you how much air you have in your air tanks. Application pressure gauge tells you how much pressure you have when you are applying the brakes, the actual pressure you are putting on the brake pedal. So here you see the A for application pressure gauge. So unless you're hitting your brakes, this needle is going to remain right at 0. As soon as you hit your brakes, this needle is going to rise. If you hit them harder, it's going to rise even further. That is the application pressure gauge. I will tell you, supply pressure gauges are mandatory required gauges. All trucks with air brakes have to have a supply pressure gauge. Application pressure gauge, I'll tell you what, I've driven a lot of trucks with it. I've driven a lot of trucks without it. It's an optional gauge. Some trucks have it, some trucks do not. Why have a test on air brakes? Because otherwise you'll receive a CDL with restrictions. And so if you want to drive a CDL vehicle with air brakes, you don't want to have an air brake restriction. To drive a tractor trailer with air brakes, you must have a Class A CDL without an air brake restriction. Makes sense. Foundation brakes are located on all wheels. So foundation brakes, they're referring to kind of the entire brake assembly. So all wheels on that truck and trailer is going to have a foundation brake on it. The most common type of foundation brakes on heavy vehicles is the S-cam drum. This is the S-cam drum setup right here. The majority of trucks and trailers and school buses and different things that have air brakes have the S-cam drum. Now I will tell you there's other types of air brakes as well, the older style wedge brakes, and then newer vehicles, a lot of newer ones as an option, are coming out with air disc brakes as well. So you do see some changes kind of coming down the line here. But right now, at the recording of this presentation, the most common type of foundation brakes is the S-cam drum. So the S-cam drum is shaped like letter S and forces the brake shoes against the inside of the brake drum. So you can see the brake cam right here, cam shaft, S-cam, whatever you want to call it. That is what it's referring to right here, and that's because it's shaped like the letter S. So what happens here, kind of making this, simplifying this, is you hit the service brake, the brake pedal, and it pushes a rubber diaphragm inside of the brake chamber, which pushes this push rod, which twists the slack adjuster here, which turns the S-cam, the camshaft, which forces the brake shoes against the brake drum, thereby stopping your vehicle. That's kind of the simplistic way on how the actual S-cam drum brake works.